Welcome to the Wellness as a Way of Life podcast, your one-stop, all-encompassing source of wellness, knowledge, wisdom, inspiration, and motivation. Here we teach you why not all wellness trends are for you, how to figure out which ones are, how to best adapt them for your personal wellness toolbox, and how ultimately to integrate your wellness practices so fully that they become to feel like brushing your teeth. A foundational part of who you are and not a check mark on your to-do list. This week on the podcast, I am so excited to share my conversation with Dr. Maloof. She is an incredible pioneer force in healthspan extension and longevity medicine. Had her on the podcast about a year ago. I am a huge fan. We talked last time all about her groundbreaking book, The Spark Factor. It's the first biohacking book for women. Her expertise spans personalized medicine, digital health technologies, biofeedback-assisted lifestyle interventions, and scientifically based wellness products and services. Her current venture, which I'm so excited to dive into with you, as the founder and CEO of Adamo Bioscience, Molly is also at the forefront of bringing modern sex education to couples with a groundbreaking intimacy program developed through her study of the science of love. The Adamo Method is a program designed for couples looking to optimize and improve their sexual and relational function, designed with top experts in the fields of medicine, psychology, and somatic sexuality. The program is a comprehensive and enjoyable sex education for modern adults. Honestly, I learned more in just the few minutes of our conversation. Okay, it's more than a few, it's about 30 minutes. But there is a point where she gives you some tips, specific tips that you can implement today that are going to shift your sexual relationship with your partner immediately. I learned so much. So excited to share this with you. Let's get into it. Welcome back, Molly. I'm so thrilled to have you here again. I so enjoyed our conversation and talking all things Spark Factor. And I was hoping we could just basically pick up right where we left off. You were about to dive into all things pleasure and sexuality.
Well,
and let's do it.
I am so excited to be back. You have such a great podcast. And I, have been basically trying to figure out my entire life what health is. Like, this has been my sort of life mission since I was a child. I actually just finished Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins. And in it was so good. I mean, I highly recommend it for anybody who's like, I thought I knew my value system. And it's funny, like, you realize that, like, you have these primary questions. And my primary question for since I was a child was, how can I solve this? And it all started with wanting to figure out human suffering. So, like, my entire life, I've been trying to figure out, why do people get sick? Why do people suffer with health problems? And it led me on this massive multi-decade journey to understand first, the basics of health, which is metabolism, right? Like, why do we want to eat right? Why do we want to exercise? Why do we need to be careful about our stress levels? Because all of that affects mitochondrial function. All of that affects our ability to produce energy in the body. Without enough energy and capacity, we don't have the ability to meet our cellular demands or our life demands. And so we lose our well-being, we lose our vitality. But the thing that blew me away when I was teaching at Stanford was the importance of human connection. It's not just about the production of energy. It's about the connection of that energy to the world around us, right? It's how we direct that energy in our work and our relationships. And arguably, one of our most important facets of our health is our primary relationships, the people that are closest to us. This is one of the largest sources of stress, is like the people we work with every day and the people that we live with. And I was really committed to trying to figure out, like, what is human connection? How does this thing work? Why does it matter? Why did we evolve it? And it led me to Helen Fisher's work, this amazing research scientist on the science of love. She basically had written a bunch of papers on the evolutionary biology of love. And I discovered there was the sex drive, there was the romantic love drive, and the drive to attach. And when I started looking at the neurobiology of these, I was like, wow, Like these are really important, like motivational drives for a reason. Because if we didn't love and we didn't connect, we didn't attach, we wouldn't have we wouldn't actually have the chances of a society to actually survive and reproduce. We need human connection to survive because we share information and resources with those that we love. We actually share oxytocin with those that we love. And when we literally hold a baby, you are absorbing, you're actually producing more oxytocin to get you to bond to this child. So you're like, your nervous system is being regulated by our interactions with other people or dysregulated. And this is why dogs are so awesome, because dogs actually can produce oxytocin as well. You can produce oxytocin by just petting a dog. So I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I want to build a company around the science of love. And then I was like, wait, this is a pretty big area. It's like, this is a pretty big, broad topic. And I was like, maybe I just start with the first part, sex part, right? Because like sexual health, like there's a lot of companies that are tackling loneliness, right? Like loneliness is an epidemic. It's worse for your health than smoking, drinking, sedentary behavior, and obesity. Loneliness is a big issue. And there's a lot of companies working on that. And then there's love, and there's a lot of relationship companies, right? Mm-hmm. But sexuality is this like black box. It's like, oh, sex? Oh, no. We're not going to go there. And even if you go to these mainstream sexual medicine conferences and you go to like these sex therapists in the world, like a lot of it is pathology oriented. And it's not about how do you optimize your sex life. It's about what's wrong with you. And I was like, huh. So I saw the paradigm of metabolic illness and then metabolic health optimization. And I was like, wow, health optimization is where I want to live for like the last decade. Now I'm looking at human connection. How can we create companies and create products around optimizing our relationships, not just dealing with the problems, but actually looking at what are ways that we can improve our existing, this existing aspect of our life. Because like arguably there's a lot more people who have an opportunity to optimize their sex life than just people who have dysfunction. Like around 30% of women have sexual dysfunction. And like sometimes it's biological, sometimes it's psychological, sometimes it's psychosomatic. Mm-hmm. Some of the biggest drivers of sexual dysfunction are relationship problems, mood disorders, and trauma. So when I first started my company, it was really all about psychedelic medicine. It was like, I think psychedelics are the solution. I've learned that they are great, but they also have a lot of downsides. And so I was like, wow, how can I still be working on this problem space of optimizing sexual health? And I still care about psychedelic experiences, but where can I go from here? And I realized that sex can be a psychedelic experience if you know what you're doing. So my company has really been focusing on how do we bring people truly transcendent sexual experiences through optimizing sexual fitness. So right now, when you go to the gym, you're optimizing your fitness. You go to a dietitian, you optimize your nutrition. You go to a sleep coach, you optimize your sleep. Maybe you get like mindfulness-based stress reduction therapy. But where do you go for like having better sex? Most people are watching porn. Most people are watching Instagram. And there's just not that many great platforms out there that are like really scientifically backed to like give you really good evidence-based sexual health education. So that's where Adamo comes in. My company has been working tirelessly to bring a new sex therapy to the world and a new paradigm in sex therapy, because the existing sex therapy today is based on Masters and Johnson's work, sensate therapy, which is mindfulness-based sensual touch. It's awesome, but it really works mostly for sexual anxiety and it stops at the act of penetration. We were like, well, there's a lot of problems that happen during sex. So we decided to build a sex therapy that actually addresses sex itself. Like it creates a new paradigm around a person as a woman. Like a lot of women are used to just being penetrated by their partners. A lot of women are not in a lot of pleasure when they have sex because they're not fully aroused. And so we are creating a platform that teaches men and women how to arouse themselves with their mind and on understanding their pelvic floor, creating a healthier pelvic floor. And then we're also teaching a role reversal a little bit, because it's actually teaching the person as the receiver to be an active receiver, to bring in their partner, to actually enable them, like literally be an active participant in the act of penetration. And then we're also teaching the adaptive giver to be more emotionally attuned to their partner so that they actually can read body language and know that this person actually wants what they're receiving. And we're teaching embodied consent. We're teaching, all sorts of amazing facets of this 8-week program. And this is what the Adamo Method is all about.
Amazing. I've actually, in the last couple of years, been working with a sex coach in a group container. It's mostly women 35 to 55. And, a lot of us are moms. We share a lot of sort of this similar things that happen, whether you're in a relationship or not, with your sexuality as you age. And yeah, for me, I think the first layer was just learning, in terms of my coaching, how essential pleasure and a healthy sexuality is, like, even if it's just with yourself on a base level, is to overall wellness, like all systems. And so I've really been enjoying the process, and I absolutely love that you're doing this. I would love to know, you kind of touched a little bit on things that you're working on to help people connect better, but can you give us more? For example, in this community, someone suggested, as couples age together, they tend to have like the recipe, or maybe they have like 5 recipes of their sexual life. So just like starting a whole new chapter in the recipe book and changing the recipe, changing the title, what is the main objective, having deeper conversations are, how do we define intimacy as a couple? How do we, I think you just get into this, I don't even want to use the word habit, but there's tends to be a lack of communication over years of being physical with the same person.
Yes. Okay. So everything you said is so awesome. I'm so excited because I know that this is like the time for this company. When you hear women like you to talk about going into like coaching groups, like I'm so excited about the future for women, because I think that when we really own our sexuality, we are unlocking massive source of energy for longevity. So like the sex coach that I work with, the sex therapist, Sayeda Desale, she has this incredible partner, Erin Michael, who's also, these are the creators of the Adamo Method. We work together to design this method. And these two people are aging in reverse constantly. I'm like, you guys, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. Every time I see you, you look younger. I don't think people really get it, but like, this is the path to longevity. Like, this is the number one factor in longevity and happiness. It's close personal relationships. So what we decided to do, I'm a data geek. I'm a science geek. I love woo, but I also love science. And I believe science is like the modern religion. So I was like, okay, if we're going to play with the modern religion game, what would we do to measure love? So first I hired a team of amazing researchers from Imperial College. And I got these incredible grad students to work with me, Tomasa Barba and Alexandra Winger. And these two people have committed their careers to studying sexuality and psychedelics. So these are really cool researchers. They're young, they're adorable, and they're amazing. And I was like, guys, how do we measure love? And they're like, I don't know, let's go look in their literature. So we started looking at sexual dysfunction. Okay, so baseline is, do you have problems with your sex life that you don't even know about? I had lack of arousal. I had hypoactive sexual arousal. I had sexual pain, and I had situational anorgasmia in my 20s. And I had no idea that I had sexual dysfunction. So like a lot of women and a lot of men are walking around thinking they're normal, and they actually have major dysfunctions. I actually still had sexual pain in my 30s and didn't really realize it until I started working with Erin Sayeda. I'm like, you mean it's not normal to be really sore after sex? And they're like, no, Molly, it's not. And I'm like, really? No, like every time I have sex, they're like, yeah, that's not normal. And I was like, oh, interesting. And so I started talking to people, and I realized that there's a lot of people with pain. And that was one of the big drivers of this method, is trying to resolve pain with sex. Cause like, nobody should have to, like, it turns out that for a lot of women, good sex is it doesn't hurt. And I was like, whoa, that's like wild. And then there's the second part, is sexual satisfaction. So there's the new sexual satisfaction scale. And this scale basically evaluates how satisfied are you with your sex life. And then there's a scale called emotional closeness, which is kind of like a surrogate measurement of love, but it really is about how emotionally intimate are you with your partner. And then there's the inclusion of other, which is a really cool scale. It's 2 circles, and it's how much they overlap. And like, imagine like codependence is like complete overlap. You want something that's connected, but not completely, merged necessarily, unless that's what you want. Some people actually have healthy codependence, I think. My parents, for example. But this is like separate, right? Like you guys are just separated, right? This is two separated people. This is two people that are overlapping. So it's like if you are seeing these circles get closer together, that's inclusion of other. How much are you including this other person in your life and your being? And then there's the triangular theory of love scale, which is intimacy, intimacy, passion, and commitment. So that's kind of like the love scales. And then of course, attachment is like really important. So I had to come to terms recently in this new relationship I'm in that I am actually pretty insecurely attached. And I hired a somatic therapist to help me work through attachment issues because I'm very intellectually aware of it, but I really think that I'm such a big believer in somatic
nervous system thing.
Yeah, I think it's nervous system regulation is the future of like therapy. And if you understand intellectually what's going on, that's great. But if you don't have it in your being and your body, then that it's not really fully understood. So that's why I'm doing a lot of work on that. And I also highly recommend the attachmentproject.com because they have some phenomenal workbooks that helped me really work through the things that were clearly areas that I could improve in my attachment. So we're measuring all these things in our intake, and we're also running a clinical study. So people who are watching this podcast, hopefully we post this before mid-January, because we are trying to recruit people to our study because we need to get 22 couples because we want to evaluate our method in all of these areas. But what are some of the ways that you can, and then the last one is sexual communication. So a lot of people just don't talk about sex. I know when I was in my 20s, I had totally shut down my ability to communicate sexually. I had some unresolved trauma from college. I had a lot of dissociation during sex, and I just was not really, I couldn't open up. It was really hard for me to become intimate. The truth is that as a lot of women these days, we've closed off our hearts because we've been wounded. We've been shut down. Society's got some issues with femininity, and it is actually our superpower to be vulnerable. It is our superpower to be open. It is our superpower to be radiant. And I think that learning to talk about sex is I think it's a great thing for women to be in these groups and to actually have these conversations. But it's another thing to talk to your partner about what your desire, what your needs are. Have you ever heard of the erotic blueprint?
Yeah, done mine.
I mean, what are you?
Shapeshifter.
I'm a shapeshifter, but I lean sensual. And my partner is shapeshifter, but he leans energetic. So learning about the things that he desires and learning about things that I desire, completely unlocked another level. So just be one big piece of our method is the first 2 weeks of it are psychosexual development. It's about really tuning into your needs, your erotic individuation, which is the things that turn you on are the things that turn you on. And they may not be the things that turn your partner on. And you have to learn about yourself and about your partner and communicate those things if you want to actually be satisfied, right? It sounds so simple, but it actually is it's pretty hard for a lot of people. And then another thing is this thing called sexual sovereignty, which is you have your body and your body is yours. And you need to learn how to own your boundaries and learn what it means to speak up and speak with your body, not just with your mouth, but also communicate with your body language and read another person's body language. So embodied consent is something that I think every single person in the country should be learning, because it's not enough to have enthusiastic verbal consent. It's really important that people understand that nervous systems can become shut down and dysregulated through past pain. So fight, flight, we all know, right? A stress response. Freeze, a lot of men don't know what a freeze response is. And then fawn, a lot of women will just fawn and do the thing that their partner wants, even though they don't really want it in their bodies. And if a man actually really knows how to read a woman's body, he'll know what a fawn response is versus enthusiastically wanting a person to come in. So we're teaching so much of this body communication so that you'll know when your partner's really enjoying themselves, and when they're not really into this, but I'm doing it because you want me to do this. And that's a very nuanced thing, that's a very nuanced space. And this is
especially in long-term relationships, right? Where there's just this assumption of what's the word I'm looking for? Requirement isn't quite it.
It's your job. This is my job to pleasure my
partner. It's part of your role. That was where I was going.
Yeah. But it's also part of their role to pleasure us. And not all men are aware of that role. And I actually met a woman at a party she's probably in her 50s, 60s. She had just divorced her partner. And she was just like, I couldn't take having sex with him over and over and over again and not feeling like I'm consenting to this experience. And over and over again, it felt she was being traumatized. And it was like, that broke me so into so many pieces that day. I was just like, my heart was so broken for this woman, because just to imagine how many women out there feel like their sexual experiences with their partners is not mutual. It's not like mutually pleasurable. And the thing is that women have an arousal system. We have like this, clitoral, urethral, vaginal complex. And it's like, men aren't getting a driver's manual for this. Not every man reads She Comes First by Ian Kerner. And when women learn to really get in tune with their body's arousal, and when men can actually read what arousal looks like, it's not what we see in porn. What we see in porn is a bunch of women who've had vaginal surgery to make their vaginas look super tiny, actually, like, what we're seeing in porn is like not what's actually supposed to be seen in a woman. A woman's vagina is supposed to be engorged and red and swollen. And you don't see that very often in porn, because porn is not designed for real life experiences. It's actually mostly the kind of model of sex we don't want to be seeing, which is friction-based and pain, and a woman not getting her needs met. So what we're also teaching in our method is this concept of suction versus friction. And it's a pretty big paradigm shift, because basically it's friction sex is like in and out, in and out, in and out, right? And you mostly, when you put your finger in your hand right here and you just move it in and out really fast, you create a lot of friction around the entrance. And that's not very pleasurable over time unless you're really aroused. So if someone's spent 20 minutes getting a woman aroused, that can be really pleasurable. But if you haven't spent 20 minutes getting aroused, that can be really painful, actually. So what we teach is pelvic floor breathing, which is using your breath to literally inspire and also push out your pelvic floor. And as you inspire and you push out your pelvic floor, you're actually creating blood flow to the pelvic floor, and you're creating more engorgement and more wetness. And it goes both ways. So for men, if men learn to breathe with their pelvic floor, they can create a stronger erection. If you do this during foreplay, during sex, you will find yourself way more aroused and way more prepared for penetration. And then you learn to bring your partner in slowly with your body using this pelvic floor breath. So you're inching this partner inside of you, and you're using your breath to bring them in. And then you're maintaining suction, which is contact between the penis and the vagina, or if you're gay or straight, the penis and the anus, which, by the way, a lot of women just don't even understand the benefits like of anal sex, because it's usually so painful that nobody even wants to do it. And even most gay men don't actually perform anal sex during sex because it's so painful. So only 30% of the time do gay men actually engage in anal sex when they have sexual contact. So I think that's just because there's too much pain. So you can actually have painless sex with suction sex, but it takes this education of how to do it, because it's not what we're not taught this in porn. Like, I'm sorry to say, but a lot of kids these days, that's where they're getting their education. Kids are starting their sex ed through watching porn. Like, that is just the baseline, because we're not teaching it in schools, and we're not teaching this and why would we teach this in schools? Because there's no way you're going to be like, hey, my kid learned penetration in school. Like, that's never going to happen. Maybe in 10, 20 years, but it's just unfortunate that like that's where kids are getting their sex ed. So what we're seeing is like a dominant submission model of sex that's friction based and painful and not aroused. And so it sucks for a lot of people. And we're just trying to create a shift in this learning so that sex can be slower or faster. It can require less energy. You don't have to have as much stamina to do suction sex. You're using your hips more than you're using your legs to thrust. So you can go for longer. And you can, I mean, like, there's this great book called Slow Sex, like this Polynesian sex book. It's like this great book over here. This is a really cool book. And it's like, for just slowing down sex, like really slowing it down, you can just like have transcendent sexual experiences. And there's another great book that's worth reading called Transcendent Sex. And it's all about what is transcendent sex. It's sex that is so phenomenally connected that you feel completely merged with your partner, and you experience this like state of total bliss where your bodies are in rhythmic entrainment, and you have this unbelievable connection to your partner that like melts away your physical body. Like, that's achievable by everybody, but you have to kind of like slow down. And that means the men also need to be educated on how to do this, which one of the things that we are really excited about is there's a big sexual desire discrepancy between men and women. And we believe that our program could be great for the women who feel like they're not able to prioritize sex, and for the men who feel like they're not getting enough. It's a way to actually prioritize weekly, playtime with your partner. Weekly, it's a couple hours a week. We're doing about an hour of videos and then an hour of integration sessions online with our sex therapists. And with those integration sessions, about 40 minutes of that is going to be just webinar style, anonymous submitting questions. And then we're also going to have 30 minutes of live Q&A. So it's a really high quality product. And I'm so excited to bring to the world. And I really appreciate you giving me a platform to talk about it here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So I want to ask a couple of follow-up questions on the specifics. But first, can you talk a little bit about the science behind pleasure specifically, healing, and all aspects of wellness? And
yeah, we're actually writing a paper on the importance of pleasure and health. And it's actually become an important facet of like some of the United Nations like healthy there's like a bunch of initiatives on trying to create a healthier population with the WHO and the UN, and actually teaching people about sexual pleasure is kind of a new priority for the world. But the same neural pathways that produce pain produce pleasure. And it turns out that women have a clitoris that is not this teeny tiny little tip that we thought, but it's actually this pretty large. It's like, it literally looks like this. There's two legs and there's like this head. So it's almost like you took the penis, and if you actually look at the penile anatomy, there's like two legs of the penis, and then there's like this shaft, and then there's like the head of the penis. Men and women really have analogous sexual structures. We just have ours on the inside, and ours are kind of like laying on our vulva. And then we have the little tiny clitoris, the clitoral head that comes out. Sadly, most doctors are not even aware of sexual anatomy because the sexual anatomy textbooks are often incorrect. And it wasn't until 2005 that accurate sexual anatomy was mapped by a surgeon, a female surgeon, an anatomist. So it's really kind of wild.
So crazy.
And I really do recommend a great documentary on Netflix about pleasure. It's like a female sexual pleasure documentary. If you just Google that, you'll find it. And it's just about how little we actually talk about female pleasure. Because it's so for so long, it's been about Viagra for men. Cool. Let's solve all men's problems. But what about women? Like, what about us? And, so one of the things that I want women to know is that you have engorgement tissues, just like men have erectile tissues. So you have tissues that need to be aroused, and blood flow is really important to your pelvic floor. But another really important thing about pelvic floor is understanding if you have pelvic floor dysfunction. So I actually recommend any woman who has even a hint of pelvic floor dysfunction, any urinary incontinence, any problems with pain or tightness, go get a pelvic floor exam, because pelvic PT is like, especially if you've had a pregnancy.
I had one session. It was life-changing after.
That's what I'm saying. And there's no way you can really do that online. Like, you got to do it in person. Like, I'm sorry, it's a physical exam. So we really do recommend that before you start any sexual health program, like, definitely meet with your doctor. Especially if you have any dysfunction, you really want to rule out biological causes like thyroid issues, like hormone dysfunction, like mood disorders. Like, you really want to look at the things that could be causing sexual dysfunction before you engage in a program like ours, because we're really designing our program for people who are generally healthy or have sexual dysfunction that's been worked up by a doctor, and they're really just ready to optimize their sexual health. We're not going to be able to fix organic causes of sexual dysfunction. So, like, for women sometimes the women have so much tightness in their vagina that they tense so much, especially if you do too many Kegels, you can actually develop too tight of a pelvic floor, and then it can actually collapse. Like, it gets so tight that it just starts to collapse upon itself. And so it's really wild that, like, you can have really lax pelvic floor where there's not enough tightness, not enough like muscle tone, which is important, or too little or too much. So there's too much muscle tone or too little muscle tone, or you can have both. And you'll never really know that unless you go to a doctor. And then there's this thing called, like, okay, so let's go back to just sexual pleasure. There's like so many nerve endings throughout the anus, the cervix, the clitoris. And you have this clitoral urethral vaginal complex, which is really kind of like the area where we call it the G spot, but there's no such thing as a G spot. It's just a bunch of anatomical And there's a bunch of anatomy, sort of things that are like anatomically there that happen to overlap, that happen to, if stimulated, create a lot of extra pleasure. But there's no like organ of the G-spot, which is fascinating. I didn't really realize that. And then one of the coolest things I've learned is that if you engage in suction sex and you really are fully aroused and your cervix, like you think this is crazy, but everyone thinks that its size matters for men. It's actually way less important than you realize, because what really matters is that women learn how to engorge their pelvic tissues so that they can push out. Like every time you breathe in and you push your pelvic floor out, you're literally moving your cervix down. So we're actually making anatomy videos to show this happening, because if you learn how to breathe with your pelvic floor, push down, you can move your cervix down and you can actually engorge your tissues so that you can engulf your partner with far more pressure and pleasure, and far more, just more contact. There's actually more contact between your sexual tissues. So you can just achieve more sensation by learning to breathe with your pelvic floor and learning to use your pelvic anatomy and learn how to understand your genitals and how they work. So like, I didn't know any of this stuff before starting working with Aaron and Seda, and I felt like I knew a lot. I thought I was like really good in bed. I
love your
I was like man, I was just a novice compared to these two Olympic level.
Yeah.
So this is the thing about sexual health optimization. It's kind of similar to fitness, right? Like I thought I knew how to get in shape, and then I hired a trainer, and I was like, literally in like 2 months, massive results that I could have never gotten on my own. This is the difference between working with professionals versus trying to do it on yourself. That's why I recommend programs like ours, because you're getting to actually see education and then work with a coach to actually enact it and ask questions around it.
Beautiful. So you kind of alluded to it, but is it only for couples at this point, or what is?
It's for couples, but I'll be honest, we have a bunch of singles joining because they're just really excited to be in our program. And I was single when I first learned the method, and it totally improved my relationship to sexuality on my own. We'll probably eventually be creating a singles sex like Adamo Method, because self-pleasure and self-love is a pretty important prerequisite for having a great partnership. So we do want to build that later on. We're just, we're a startup, and we, have.
I see a spin-off company of your dating app that, prereq, you have to take your course.
I mean, I think everybody would be better off if they had this kind of sex ed before they got into a relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're mostly looking for couples. But if you're a single and you're really excited to learn, the one disclaimer we have to tell people is, if you are single and you use this method, you can accidentally fall madly in love with people, because this connection is so incredibly like potent at emotional attunement. So you just got to be really careful with this. We're like, hey, if you have casual sex with someone with this method, it's not our fault if you fall madly in love with them. Like, but anyway, this has been such an amazing podcast. Thank you so much for having me, Megan. And I really, really want to come back again in the future and talk more about all this.
Thanks, Dr. Molly. It was a pleasure, and we'll be sharing all the links and all the things, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks again for listening. If you haven't already, I highly recommend that you listen to the episode I did with Professor Barbara San-Roman. She and I are embarking on a new adventure. Everything leadership, self-leadership, and wellness. We are calling it Elevate and Lead. It is an 8-month, 8-session program, a strategic leadership development program for women to optimize their capacity, a comprehensive approach to elevating executive leadership in corporate spaces. Training and retaining high-quality female talent is paramount to the future success of any company. The impact is much greater than diversity and inclusion alone. The cost of high turnover of skilled women is an investment in not only time, momentum, strategy, expertise, and potential. We are doing this through 8 micro-learning experiences to help corporate women feel embodied and sustainable in their leadership capacity. I will suggest that you check out the website to get a breakdown of the 8 sessions if this is resonating, and we highly recommend that you skip the trial and error and embrace a transformative program that compresses time, accelerates growth, and ensures the rise of a new era of leadership.